The crystal chandeliers of the sterling Grand Hotel glimmered above a scene of quiet cruelty. Emma Collins stood in the center of the lobby, her hands trembling as she clutched a silver tray still wet with spilled champagne. Around her, the other staff members froze, unsure whether to look at her or the furious man pointing his finger. Mr. Grant's voice cut through the air like glass. "You're finished here, Collins. Pack your things." A hush fell over the room. The marble floor seemed to reflect Emma's humiliation as sharply as a mirror. She wanted to speak, to explain that it was an accident, that she hadn't even touched the glass, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. Laughter, low and cruel, rippled from a few corners. The sound was soft, but it burned more than any shout could. Mr. Grant took a step closer, his polished shoes echoing like a countdown to her ruin. "I won't have incompetence in this hotel," he snapped. Emma lowered her eyes, feeling every gaze pierce her like pins. She swallowed her pride along with her tears, knowing there was no point fighting a man who had already decided her worth. The tray slipped from her hands and crashed to the floor, ringing like a final verdict. No one moved to help her. The other waitresses stood still, pretending to be busy while their hearts raced. One of them, young and nervous, looked away just as Emma's eyes met hers, a silent plea for kindness unanswered. Mr. Grant turned to the others. "Let this be an example," he said coldly. "We don't tolerate mistakes here." His voice carried farther than the chandelier's light. Emma's lips parted, but only a faint breath came out. She bent down to pick up the tray, her fingers trembling, then stopped. Instead, she straightened her back. The act was small, almost invisible, but something in her posture changed. The quiet decision to leave with dignity, not defeat. Without a word, she untied her apron and placed it neatly on the counter. The lobby doors reflected her as she walked toward them, each step slow, steady, echoing across the marble. Outside, the city shimmered behind the glass, cold, bright, and indifferent. Mr. Grant's voice called her name one last time, but she didn't turn back. She pushed the doors open, and the wind met her face like a whisper of freedom. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to breathe. Behind her, someone muttered, "She won't last a week out there." Another replied, "She'll be begging for her job before nightfall." Their words faded as the doors swung shut. Emma's reflection vanished with them. The laughter inside became just another sound swallowed by the noise of the city. Yet, under that noise, something deeper stirred, a secret no one could have guessed, because Emma Collins was not just a fired waitress. She was a name erased from a powerful family's history, a ghost who had chosen to live quietly among the people who would never recognize her. The hotel had unknowingly pushed out its own lost heir. But no one, not even Emma, was ready to face what that meant yet. She walked down the avenue, her uniform still spotless, her eyes distant but burning with a faint, unspoken promise. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a reckoning. And when she returned, it wouldn't be for revenge. It would be for truth. Before we go any further, take a breath with me. If you were standing in that lobby, would you have helped her or stayed silent like everyone else? Tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's go back and uncover how everything began, long before that moment of humiliation changed Emma Collins's life forever. The city forgot Emma Collins within days. Her name disappeared from the hotel's roster, her locker emptied, her schedule erased as if she'd never existed. Mr. Grant replaced her shift by morning and never mentioned her again. To the staff, she was a whisper, that waitress who got fired. To the guests, she was no one at all. Gossip spread like perfume in the hotel corridors. Some said she moved to another town. Others swore they saw her crying at the bus station. but no one truly knew where she went. The truth was quieter, lonelier. Emma had vanished without leaving a single trace, her phone dead, her apartment unlocked, a note on the wall. "Don't worry about me." Miles away, at the edge of a silent lake, surrounded by autumn pines, a small cabin waited beneath the grey sky. Inside, a fire flickered against the darkness, its light dancing over Emma's weary face. The uniform she once wore lay folded on a chair, untouched. The silence was both comfort and punishment, the sound of a world she had chosen to leave behind. On the wooden table sat a locked box, its brass edges dulled with age. Emma carried it from place to place for years, but never opened it. Tonight, her humiliation still burned too deep to ignore. She reached for the key hidden in her necklace chain and turned it slowly. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through her chest. Inside lay fragments of a life she had buried, photographs of her parents, newspaper clippings, an old business card embossed in gold. Collins Industries. She ran her fingers over the name as though it belonged to someone else. Her reflection shimmered in the metal, unfamiliar and distant. The world thought she was nothing, but this box whispered otherwise. A folded letter rested beneath the photos, yellowed and fragile. Her mother's handwriting curved across the page. "My dearest Emma, when the world forgets who you are, remember who you were born to be." The words blurred as her eyes filled. She pressed the letter against her chest, breathing as if trying to inhale her mother's voice. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry. The cabin groaned with the wind outside, the fire casting long shadows along the walls. Every flame seemed to reveal another memory. Her father's laughter, her brother's distant stare, the flash of cameras during the scandals. She wondered if Nathan ever thought of her, or if he'd erased her as easily as the world had. The ache of betrayal pulsed beneath every heartbeat. She stepped outside and stood by the lake. The air was cold enough to sting her lungs, but she didn't care. Across the still water, the reflection of the moon wavered like something alive. "You were wrong," she whispered to the ghost of her father. "I didn't run from who I am. I ran from what you made me." The wind carried her words away into the night. Back inside, she gathered the photos and the letter, placing them gently back into the box. The lid closed with purpose this time, not to hide, but to protect. She stared at the flame until her eyes grew heavy, a quiet strength settling inside her. Whatever came next, it would no longer be silence. Somewhere out there, her name still mattered. Then, 3 sharp knocks echoed against the wooden door. Emma froze. No one should have known she was here. The fire snapped violently, shadows jumping across the walls. Another knock, heavier, insistent. Her pulse quickened as she stepped closer, heart pounding against the quiet. When she reached for the handle, a voice whispered from the other side, "Miss Collins, we need to talk." Sunlight poured through the mirrored towers of downtown Chicago, painting the glass in molten gold. On the 34th floor of Collins Industries, a boardroom gleamed with ruthless precision. Chrome, marble, silence. Nathan Collins stood at the head of the table, his reflection fractured in the wall of glass behind him. "The Hale acquisition moves forward," he said. "No delays." Around the long table, the directors exchanged glances. Some admired his composure, others saw only ambition disguised as leadership. Behind Nathan, a massive portrait of his father hung on the wall, oil and canvas made of authority. "Our legacy must adapt," he continued. "Progress requires sacrifice." The words sounded rehearsed, hollow, but no one dared question them. As the meeting ended, Nathan lingered alone. The silence pressed against him, heavy as guilt. He removed his tie and loosened his collar, his reflection staring back through the glass. The skyline stretched endless beyond him, but even here, at the top of everything, he felt trapped beneath his father's shadow. He poured a drink, though it was barely noon. The whiskey burned, grounding him in the illusion of control. He whispered to the portrait, "I did what you couldn't. I made the company untouchable." The eyes in the painting didn't answer. They never did. In their silence, he saw judgment. Nathan looked away. Even now, years after Emma vanished, he could still hear her laughter echoing faintly through the halls. He walked to his desk, opening the drawer he never touched. Inside lay a folded newspaper, its edges frayed. Heiress of Colin's fortune missing. The article was old, the photo faded, but her eyes still burned with the same quiet defiance he remembered. He pressed his thumb over her face. "You made it easy for me to..." he muttered, but the truth was, he never had. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Hale is here to see you," his assistant said. Nathan straightened his jacket. "Send him in." Victor Hale entered moments later, immaculate suit, polite smile, eyes like polished stone. "Nathan," he greeted, "I trust everything is proceeding smoothly." Their handshake was firm, businesslike, but underneath it pulsed the cold understanding of two men who saw loyalty as currency. They discussed profit margins and timelines, their words mechanical, yet Victor's attention drifted toward the family portrait. "You don't talk much about your sister," he said. Nathan's jaw tightened. "There's nothing to talk about," he replied. Victor smiled faintly. "Of course, families are complicated." The air between them cooled, the weight of the unspoken thick enough to touch. When Victor left, Nathan sat alone again, the faint scent of his cologne lingering like smoke. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Honking cars, distant sirens, people moving with purpose. Inside, time stood still. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, staring at the empire his lies had built. Every deal, every dollar, it all felt borrowed, temporary. He rose and walked to the window. The skyline stretched far beyond the horizon, endless and indifferent. For years he'd chased respect, mistaking it for love. But power was a lonely crown, and his reflection in the glass looked nothing like the man he once wanted to be. Somewhere beneath that same sky, his sister was still out there. Nathan pressed his palm to the glass, his breath clouding his own reflection. "You had the name," he whispered, "but I kept the world." His voice cracked slightly, softer than the hum of the city below. For a moment, the light flickered across the skyline, and he wondered, not for the first time, if Emma's absence had cost him everything he thought he'd won. The black sedan stopped outside the Sterling Grand Hotel as dawn broke over the skyline. Victor Hale stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks with the precision of a man who never left anything to chance. The city's chill didn't touch him. He carried his own climate of confidence. His assistant, Clara, followed in silence, tablet in hand, every movement rehearsed to his rhythm. Inside, the lobby gleamed in muted golds and silvers, polished to perfection. Victor's eyes scanned the space, sharp and restless. "Decay," he murmured, tracing a crack in the marble with his thumb. "The kind you don't see until it's too late." Clara jotted down notes she didn't understand. To Victor, neglect was opportunity, imperfection, profit. Mr. Grant met him near the reception, smile tight, hands slightly trembling. "Mr. Hale, welcome back. The property is ready for review." Victor's handshake was polite but brief. "I trust you've corrected the staffing issues we discussed." Grant nodded too quickly. "Absolutely, sir. No more weak links." Victor's gaze lingered on him just long enough to make him sweat. As they toured the suites, Victor's attention never strayed from the details, the wear on the stair rail, the uneven shine of the mirrors, the hesitation in people's steps as he passed. Fear had a scent, and it followed him everywhere. "Order!" he said at last, is built on consequence. Clara didn't reply. She never did. She knew better than to mistake philosophy for empathy. In the ballroom he paused beneath the chandeliers. His reflection fractured in the crystal facets, multiplied and distorted. "I hosted a dinner here once," he said softly. "Years ago." Grant laughed nervously. "Before my time, sir." Victor's eyes flicked toward him. Clearly. He turned away before the man could stammer another word. They entered the upper offices next. The walls were lined with photographs of the hotel's history, founders, grand openings, portraits of the Collins family. One frame in particular caught Victor's eye, a young woman, smiling faintly beside her father. Beneath it, the plaque read, "Harold and Emma Collins, 2007. His expression didn't change, but something in his gaze did. He reached out, brushing a speck of dust from the glass. Clara noticed, but said nothing. "Pretty," he murmured. "Whatever happened to her?" Grant hesitated, caught off guard. "Oh, her, the daughter. She disappeared years ago. A scandal, I think." Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Disappeared," he repeated, as if testing the word for weight. Back in the executive lounge, Victor dismissed the others. Alone, he poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light like molten gold. He leaned against the window, staring at the city sprawling beneath him. Collins Industries was nearly his, just one final signature away, yet that photograph lingered in his mind like a ghost. He reached for his phone and opened a private database, typing in a name he hadn't thought of in years. Emma Collins. The search returned dozens of results. Articles, photos, rumors, all ending with the same word: missing. Victor's reflection stared back at him in the glass, sharp and unreadable. "People don't just vanish," he muttered. "Not completely." The screen blinked, loading one final entry, an employee record dated only weeks ago. Name, E. Monroe. Position, consultant, Sterling Grand Hotel. Victor froze. The glass in his hand tilted slightly, a drop of whiskey tracing his finger. His eyes narrowed. The faintest smile curved his lips, dangerous and knowing. "Well," he whispered, "isn't that interesting?" The Sterling Grand stood tall against the winter sky, its mirrored facade reflecting the morning light like an unblinking eye. Emma paused outside the entrance, her gloved hand brushing against the glass door she once pushed open in shame. This time, her name was different, her posture unshakable. The badge clipped to her coat read, E. Monroe, Consultant. The lobby hadn't changed. The same gold tones, the same faint scent of lilies and polished marble. But to Emma, everything felt colder. The whispers that once surrounded her were gone, replaced by polite greetings and shallow smiles. She returned them with the grace of someone who knew how fragile power really was. In their eyes, she was new. In truth, she had come home. Mr. Grant greeted her with a grin too wide to be genuine. "Ms. Monroe, we're honored to have you." His handshake was clammy, his tone rehearsed. "Your resume is impressive. Consulting for major investors, fluent in finance and operations." Emma smiled politely. "I've had years to study what makes businesses fail." He didn't hear the weight beneath her words. They walked through the hotel's corridors, Mr. Grant proudly narrating its rebirth under Victor Hale's impending ownership. Emma listened, absorbing every detail, every lie disguised as progress. In the corner of her eye, she caught the faint mark on the marble floor where her tray had once fallen. It gleamed faintly under the light, a scar the building hadn't healed. When she entered the staff offices, heads turned. Some admired her confidence, others studied her warily. Only Rosa, the head housekeeper, paused long enough to truly look, her brow furrowed. "You remind me of someone," she said quietly. Emma's reply came gentle, but final. "Maybe I just have one of those faces." Rosa nodded, though her eyes didn't entirely believe it. Alone in her temporary office, Emma opened her laptop and accessed the internal systems. Her new title granted her unrestricted access to the hotel's financial data. Rows of numbers flickered across the screen, tidy on the surface but rotten underneath. Transfers, discrepancies, falsified audits, all leading back to Collins Industries. Her pulse quickened. Her brother's fingerprints were everywhere. She leaned back in her chair, the city skyline glittering beyond the window. Beneath the calm mask of professionalism, a storm gathered. Every deceit she uncovered felt like a thread being pulled from the same fabric that once wrapped her family in prestige. But now, she wasn't a frightened girl running from a name. She was a woman following the trail of truth. A knock at the door pulled her from thought. Liam entered quietly, balancing a tray of coffee. "Welcome back, welcome aboard," he corrected himself, a shy smile flickering. She met his eyes, recognition passing silently between them. He didn't say her real name, and she didn't thank him for pretending not to know. Sometimes silence was loyalty. After he left, Emma stood by the window again. The reflection staring back at her wasn't the waitress who had bowed her head. It was someone colder, wiser, someone who had walked through humiliation and found strength in the ashes. The hum of the hotel below rose faintly, blending with the rhythm of her breathing. Every corner of this place remembered her. She closed her eyes, letting the weight of the past settle and dissolve. Revenge no longer guided her. Purpose did. The building that had once broken her would now witness her rebirth, and in the quiet between heartbeats, she realized something she had never dared to before. Perhaps the truest power wasn't in being feared or remembered, but in returning unseen, stronger than ever. The hotel's corridors had a rhythm of their own. Footsteps, distant chatter, the muted hum of machinery behind the walls. Emma moved through them like a ghost wearing flesh. Every greeting was polite, every glance too quick to linger. But she could feel it, eyes following her, questions rising in whispers once she passed. The Sterling Grand had begun to notice her. In the staff lounge, a pair of housekeepers spoke in low voices. "That new consultant. She's different." "Different how?" "Like she's been here before." Their laughter was nervous, unsure. Emma, sitting just outside the doorway, heard every word. She smiled faintly, not out of pride, but out of confirmation. Secrets, always. Left a scent, and curiosity was the first to follow it. Her work gave her access to everything: financial ledgers, employee rosters, supply invoices. Most saw paperwork. She saw patterns. Certain accounts repeated irregularly, like a code only she could read. Funds redirected to offshore names she recognized all too well, one of them belonging to Nathan Collins. Each new discovery felt like a heartbeat in the dark. Late at night, the hotel changed. The lights dimmed, voices faded, and the hum of... The air vents grew louder than conversation. Emma stayed behind after hours, combing through digital records that smelled faintly of smoke and deceit. The glow of the monitor lit her face, half angel, half avenger. The silence around her was no longer empty. It was watching. A creak from the hallway made her look up. Nothing moved. Still, the faint echo of shoes lingered just beyond the door, deliberate and unhurried. She turned off the light and waited, listening. The steps paused, then retreated. The tension in her chest didn't fade. It simply changed shape, like an instinct that refused to sleep. Someone knew she was here. The next morning she noticed small changes: a misplaced file, a light left on in her locked office, a faint scent of cologne she didn't wear. Paranoia had a taste, sharp and metallic, and she could feel it settling on her tongue. When she greeted co-workers, some smiled too quickly. Others avoided her entirely. The hotel's walls seemed to lean closer, listening. She met with Liam in the quiet of the service corridor. He handed her a folder wrapped in plain brown paper. "I found these in accounting," he said. "Transfers signed off before Victor's takeover." Emma flipped through them quickly, her pulse racing. "They're falsifying losses," she whispered. "They've been stealing from the company for years." Liam's eyes widened. "Then you're sitting on dynamite." That night, Emma returned to the archives. Dust floated in the flashlight beam as she pulled out boxes long untouched. In one, she found copies of internal memos between Nathan and Victor, proof of the conspiracy she'd only guessed at. Her breath caught. Everything was here. Dates, accounts, the sale agreements. Enough to bring them both down. The floor creaked behind her. She turned sharply, flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing. Only the soft whisper of paper and the smell of old ink. She exhaled slowly, forcing calm. Then, just as she reached for the final file, she noticed it, the faintest glimmer of red, a recording light, blinking from the corner of the ceiling. Emma froze. Her hand hovered over the folder as the realization hit. She wasn't alone in the dark. Someone had been watching her the entire time. The light blinked once more, then went out. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with promise and threat. And for the first time since her return, Emma Collins felt fear crawling back beneath her skin. Morning light poured through the glass walls of the cafe, catching in the steam rising from coffee cups. Emma sat alone, her eyes on the crowd, but her thoughts elsewhere. The memory of that red light in the archive still burned behind her eyes. Someone had seen her, yet pretending was survival, and so she smiled, quiet and composed, as if the world weren't closing in. "Refill?" The voice was soft but steady, pulling her from her thoughts. She looked up and froze. Liam stood there, a coffee pot in hand, his smile uncertain. His hair was shorter, his eyes more tired, but the warmth was the same. For a heartbeat, the years between them vanished. "It's been a while," he said gently, though he already knew she couldn't answer. She recovered quickly, forcing her expression into polite neutrality. "Thank you," she replied, her tone measured. But Liam wasn't fooled. He leaned a little closer. "You don't fool me, Emma." Her hand stilled mid-air. The sound of her name, her real name, was both knife and comfort. "Not here," she whispered. "Please." He nodded once, his voice soft. "After your shift." They met later, in the dim glow of the staff corridor. The walls hummed with the sound of machinery, like a mechanical heartbeat. "I knew it was you," Liam said, his words a mix of relief and anger. "After what they did, how could you come back?" Emma looked at him for a long time before answering. "Because I won't let them rewrite my story." He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "You shouldn't have to do this alone." "I have to," she said. "It's my family, my name, my fight." He shook his head. "Then let me be your witness." The sincerity in his tone disarmed her. For the first time in years, someone offered help without wanting something in return. It frightened her more than betrayal ever had. Liam handed her a folded sheet of paper, a list of internal contacts and meeting records. "You'll need these," he said. "If Victor and Nathan are connected, this proves it." She scanned the names, her pulse quickening. "Where did you get this?" "From the accounting department," he said. "You'd be surprised what people say when they think no one's listening." For hours, they sat in that narrow corridor, piecing together fragments of truth. Each discovery bound them tighter, weaving an unspoken alliance built on risk and memory. When she grew quiet, Liam broke the silence with a half-smile. "You haven't changed," he said. "You still hold your breath before you lie." She met his gaze, startled. "And you still notice what no one else does." The faint hum of the hotel returned as dawn began to glow through the windows. Emma gathered the papers and stood, her voice steady. "If anything happens, keep these safe." Liam frowned. "You're scaring me." "Good," she said. "That means you understand." There was something final in her tone, something that felt like both warning and gratitude. As she walked away, Liam called after her, "Emma, why now?" She paused, hand resting on the doorframe. "Because I'm done being the story people tell," she said quietly. "It's time I become the one who tells it." Then she disappeared down the hallway, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume and the echo of her resolve. In the stillness that followed, the hotel seemed to exhale. Somewhere deep within its walls, the ghosts of her past stirred, restless, waiting. Trust was a fragile thing, in a place built on lies. Yet as Emma stepped back into the light, she understood something she hadn't in years. Even in a world of deceit, one honest heart could still be enough to begin again. The days that followed blurred together, meetings, fake smiles, and the slow tightening of invisible strings. Emma felt it in the air, that subtle change when prey is being watched. Every door she opened seemed to breathe differently, every shadow lingered a moment too long. Somewhere inside the Sterling Grand, someone had begun to move against her. It started with small things, files out of place, passwords mysteriously changed, a phone call that went silent when she answered. Emma kept her calm, pretending to be unaware, even as her pulse quickened with every new sign. She told Liam nothing. The fewer people who knew her secret, the safer he would be. Or at least, that's what she told herself. On the fourth morning, Mr. Grant summoned her. His voice was unusually polite over the intercom. "Miss Munro, could you step into my office?" She walked in to find him leaning casually against his desk, a half-smile curling at his lips. "You've been quite the busy consultant," he said, tapping a folder with his finger. "Tell me, do you always work this thoroughly?" Emma didn't flinch. "I take pride in my job." "I bet you do," he replied. "But I found something curious. Security footage from 2 weeks ago." He turned the monitor toward her, and her own face stared back, grainy and cold in the blue light. The archive room, the folder in her hands, the secret camera she hadn't seen. "Care to explain what you were doing down there?" For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The hum of the air vent filled the silence. Then Emma smiled faintly. "You're reaching, Mr. Grant." He leaned closer. "Am I, or should I say, Miss Collins?" The name struck her like a slap. Her mask cracked for only a second, but that was enough. His grin widened, triumph laced with malice. "You can relax," he said smoothly. "I'm not going to expose you. Not yet." He circled her like a vulture. "Let's call it an arrangement. You keep quiet about what you're digging into, and I keep quiet about who you really are." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Everyone wins." Emma's jaw tightened. "Except integrity," she said. "But that's never been your concern." He chuckled, enjoying her restraint. "You should be careful, Ms. Monroe. Even secrets can't protect you forever. Some truths are better buried." Her eyes hardened. "And some graves aren't deep enough." She turned to leave, but his voice followed her like smoke. "Don't forget. I decide how long your silence lasts." That night, she met Liam in the deserted lounge. "Something's wrong," he said, noticing her pale face. "You're not telling me everything." She shook her head. "It's better if you don't know." But her hands trembled as she poured coffee neither of them would drink. He reached for her wrist. "Emma, talk to me." "Not now," she said softly. "Please, just trust me once more." When she returned to her suite, the air felt strange, colder, heavier. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, as if someone else stood behind the glass. She opened her laptop, but before she could type, a new email appeared in bold. "We warned you once. You didn't listen. No sender, no subject. Only an attached photo, herself, standing in the archives, unaware of the lens. Emma's breath caught. The photo was fresh, taken from a new angle, closer, clearer. Someone wasn't just watching her anymore. They were here. A sound came from the hallway. Soft, deliberate, approaching. She turned toward the door, pulse hammering in her ears. The lights flickered once. Then, from the crack beneath the door, a shadow moved. The envelope arrived on Emma's desk at dawn, unmarked and silent. Inside was a single card, dinner, Suite 3201, tonight. She stared at the elegant handwriting, the ink pressed with precision. Victor Hale didn't summon without purpose, and she knew this was no casual invitation. Still, when night fell, she dressed with calm resolve and climbed the 32nd floor. The suite glowed with amber light and quiet luxury. Victor stood by the window, framed by the city's reflection, a glass of wine in his hand. "Ms. Monroe," he greeted, his voice smooth as silk over steel. "I've been meaning to thank you for your excellent work." She smiled politely. "Efficiency is my job, Mr. Hale." His lips curved. "And yet, efficiency isn't what makes you interesting." Dinner was a chess match disguised as conversation. He asked about her education, her views on management, even her philosophy about loyalty. Emma answered carefully, her tone measured, revealing nothing but competence. Yet his eyes studied her as if she were a puzzle missing one final piece. Between them, the table felt like a battlefield carved from crystal. "You remind me of someone I once met," Victor said at last, leaning back. "A woman who carried silence like armor." Emma tilted her head. "Did she survive you?" His smile widened. "For a time." He poured her another glass of wine, the liquid catching the light like blood. "Tell me, Miss Monroe, have you ever lost everything?" She didn't blink. "Once," she said. "But sometimes losing everything is the only way to see what's worth keeping." He studied her quietly, the air between them heavy. Victor wasn't used to opponents who spoke in riddles. For a brief moment she saw something behind his composure, a flicker of recognition, like memory trying to surface. Then it was gone. He slid a folder toward her across the table. "I could use someone like you," he said. "Someone who understands control and how to rebuild it." Inside, she saw a contract. Executive liaison to Collins Integration. The job came with a salary large enough to silence conscience. "That's generous," she said evenly. "I don't trust generosity." Victor leaned closer. "You don't have to. You just have to accept that power respects power." His words lingered in the space between them. Emma closed the folder, her fingers steady despite the storm building in her chest. "I'll think about it," she said. "I prefer certainty," he replied. "So do I," she answered, rising from her seat. At the door, Victor's voice followed her. "One more thing. The day you stop pretending to be someone else, come see me. I think I'd like to know the real woman beneath the mask." Emma turned slightly, her reflection framed by the glass. "Maybe you already do," she said softly, then walked out. Behind her, the silence felt like applause and threat. In the elevator, her pulse finally quickened. She looked at her reflection in the mirrored walls, the calm surface of a storm about to break. Accepting his offer would put her closer to the truth and to danger. Declining it would mean losing her only chance to strike. Either choice would cost her something she wasn't sure she could afford. The elevator descended slowly, lights gliding down her face like fading stars. She thought of her mother's words, of the letter folded in her bag. "When the world forgets who you are, remember who you were born to be." Emma closed her eyes and exhaled. The mask she wore was suffocating, but beneath it, her true face had never been more awake. The storm outside rolled over the city in low thunder, shaking the windows of the Sterling Grand. In the basement archives, the air smelled of dust and paper, left too long in the dark. Emma stood among towers of forgotten records, her flashlight cutting thin lines of light through the gloom. Liam followed close behind, his breath visible in the cold air. "You sure this is where to look?" he whispered. She nodded. The hotel kept a copy of every Collins-related transaction, every legal handover. Her voice echoed off the concrete walls, calm but tense. They worked in silence, pulling box after box from the shelves, old paper scraping like whispers of the dead. The dust clung to her hands, the weight of history pressing down with every drawer she opened. Then she saw it, a folder with the Collins crest stamped in fading gold. Legal Affairs, 2009. Emma froze. Her father's handwriting marked the edge. She sat on the floor and opened it slowly, the smell of aged ink and cedar rising from the pages. Inside, a thick document was folded carefully in plastic. Last Will and Testament of Harold Collins. Liam crouched beside her. "Emma, is that—" She nodded, too stunned to speak. The pages trembled in her hands as she scanned the text. Every line felt like a ghost breathing beside her. Her father had left the controlling shares of Collins Industries to her, not Nathan. The document was clear, signed, witnessed, sealed. Everything she'd been denied was written here in ink. Her throat tightened. "He never trusted Nathan," she said softly. "He knew what he was becoming." She turned another page and stopped. A second document lay beneath, its title handwritten in Nathan's familiar sharp script, "Amended Draft." In the event of Emma's disappearance, her pulse spiked. "He forged an alternate will," she whispered. "He buried the original." Liam's jaw clenched. "If this gets out, it destroys him." Emma stared down at the papers, torn between fury and sorrow. "It destroys more than him," she said. "It destroys the name my father built, the one he wanted me to protect." Her voice wavered. "How do I save what's right without tearing everything apart?" The question hung in the dust-filled air. A metallic sound echoed through the basement. Distant, faint, but real. Liam froze. What was that? Emma turned off her flashlight, plunging them into darkness. The silence stretched thin, broken only by the slow drip of a leaking pipe. Then came another sound, footsteps, steady, deliberate, approaching from the far end of the corridor. Someone else was down there. She grabbed the folder, clutching it to her chest. Liam reached for the flashlight again, but Emma stopped him with a touch. "No light," she whispered. The footsteps drew closer, the rhythm unhurried, confident. A shadow slid across the far wall, tall and unmistakably human. "We're not alone," Liam breathed. Emma's hand trembled around the will. The light of a flashlight flared suddenly from the other end of the aisle, slicing through the dark. Emma ducked behind a shelf, heart pounding. The beam swept over the boxes, then paused on the one she'd left open. A man's voice echoed through the silence, low and calm. "I knew you'd come looking, Miss Collins." The name struck the air like a match. She held her breath, every muscle rigid. The footsteps stopped just beyond the corner, and the beam of light flicked off. The darkness swallowed them both. For a moment, all she could hear was the sound of her own pulse, and then, from the shadows, the faint click of a gun's safety being released. Morning light broke across the skyline like glass. Inside the Sterling Grand, the staff moved with nervous energy, preparing for the event that would redefine the Collins legacy. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers, cameras lined the walls, and journalists filled the air with anticipation. Emma watched from a distance, hidden among the quiet hum of service workers, her heart a steady drum beneath calm breathing. It had been 3 nights since the basement. She still remembered the echo of that voice, the metallic sound of the gun, the darkness so thick she couldn't tell if she'd stopped breathing. Liam had gotten her out through the service tunnels before the guards found them. Now, the will was safe, hidden, copied, protected. But safety didn't feel like peace. It felt like a pause before war. In the reflection of a silver tray, she adjusted the collar of her old uniform, the same one she had worn the day she was fired. The fabric was clean, but the memory clung to it like smoke. She'd chosen to wear it again, not as disguise, but as declaration. The world had forgotten the waitress, but she hadn't. That girl still stood somewhere inside her, waiting to be seen. Liam joined her by the back entrance, his face tight with worry. "You don't have to do this today," he said. "There'll be another chance." She shook her head. "No, there won't. Once they sign, the company's gone forever." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pressing something into her palm. A silver locket. "For luck," he said softly. "You'll need more than courage." When she stepped into the ballroom, the noise dimmed. Nathan was already on stage beside Victor Hale, both glowing under the press lights, the perfect image of partnership. The cameras adored them. Victor's charm radiated like a weapon. Nathan's smile tight enough to hide the tremor in his jaw. Emma moved quietly along the edge of the crowd, unseen yet inevitable. Her eyes found the Collins crest engraved on the podium, the same emblem from her father's letter, the one she'd kept folded in her pocket all this time. It no longer symbolized power or wealth. It symbolized the cost of silence. She could feel her pulse matching the rhythm of the reporter's flashes. Every step closer felt like another page turning toward the truth. Victor began to speak, his voice calm and commanding. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for Collins Industries," he said, gesturing to Nathan. "Together, we preserve a legacy of excellence." Emma's lips curved into something between a smile and a wound. "Preserve," she thought. "You're burying it alive." She took another step forward, blending with the movement of servers carrying champagne. Her gaze caught Nathan's for a fraction of a second. He froze, his expression breaking, the glass in his hand trembling. The shock in his eyes was unmistakable, recognition, fear, guilt. He mouthed her name before forcing a smile back into place. Victor noticed his brows tightening, curiosity flickering across his polished mask. The air between them thickened like storm clouds. Emma reached for the folded papers hidden beneath the tray she carried. Around her flashes continued. Laughter rippled, the illusion of celebration holding for one final breath. And yet, beneath the glitter and sound, she felt the world narrowing into focus. The hotel, the family, the secret, all converging in this single room. The truth was no longer a choice. It was gravity. She looked up at the chandeliers, the same ones that had witnessed her humiliation, her exile, her return. Their light scattered across her face like fractured stars. In that moment, she understood what her mother had meant, that strength was never about revenge, it was about memory. And when she finally stepped into the light, it wasn't to reclaim her name. It was to honor the woman who had carried it in silence for far too long. Applause rolled through the ballroom like distant thunder. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised, cameras flashing as Victor Hale raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he declared, his voice smooth as glass. Nathan echoed him, smiling wide for the headlines. The audience cheered, oblivious to the tremor beneath the moment. In the crowd, Emma's hand tightened around the hidden folder. She moved with the servers, the tray steady in her grasp, her heart steady in her chest. The hum of conversation drowned beneath the noise in her ears. Memory, betrayal, her father's voice, all blending into a single pulse. When she stopped near the stage, she set the tray down with deliberate grace and looked up. Nathan's smile faltered the instant he saw her. For a second, the air seemed to vanish. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Shock, fear, disbelief. He blinked, almost imperceptibly, as if trying to erase what he saw. Emma stepped forward, the crowd's noise dimming around her. The uniform she wore was no longer a disguise. It was a declaration. "Mr. Collins," she said softly, but her voice carried. "Before you toast to your success, there's something you forgot." Whispers rippled through the hall. Nathan's face drained of color. Victor's gaze sharpened like a blade, studying Emma with cool fascination. She reached into her apron and withdrew the document. "This," she said, her tone even, "is my father's original will, the one you hid." The paper unfolded under the lights, its seal intact, its signature clear. The sound of cameras filled the room like rain. Nathan lunged toward her. "Don't you dare!" His voice cracked, but Victor stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. "Let her finish," he said, smiling faintly. "I'm curious." Emma's eyes met Victor's for a moment, two predators recognizing each other's intent. She turned back to the crowd. "This company was never yours," she said. "It was stolen piece by piece, while the world applauded." Gasps echoed, reporters shouted questions, the ballroom erupted into noise, but Emma didn't move. Nathan's composure shattered. He shouted denials no one heard. Victor, meanwhile, simply observed, silent, calculating, unreadable. He was already assessing how to survive this. Emma could see it in his eyes. He wasn't shocked. He was adapting. Security approached, uncertain who to protect. "Escort her out," Nathan barked, but his voice had lost its command. "Now!" The guards hesitated. One of them, recognizing her, froze. "Sir," he whispered, "that's her. That's Emma Collins." The words spread like wildfire. Cameras turned back to her, flashes illuminating the truth she had buried for years. Victor's calm finally cracked. He stepped closer, voice low enough only she could hear. "You think this will end with applause?" Emma looked up at him, eyes steady. "No," she said, "it ends with consequence." He smiled faintly, the expression almost admiring. "Then I hope you're ready to bleed for your truth." The crowd surged as reporters shouted, flashes blinding. Nathan tried to snatch the folder again, but Liam appeared at Emma's side, blocking him. "It's over," he said firmly. The noise swelled until it was deafening, accusations, questions, chaos. And then, in the blur of light and voices, the chandelier above them flickered once, twice, before the entire room went black. A single scream cut through the darkness, sharp and real. The glass shattered. Emma's breath caught as a cold hand brushed her arm, too deliberate to be an accident. Someone was moving toward her in the dark, and before she could speak, the sound of a gunshot split the air, echoing like thunder inside the heart of the Sterling Grand. The darkness broke with a flash of emergency lights. Red strobes blinked across the ballroom, painting every face in fragments of fear. Screams gave way to whispers, whispers to silence. Emma stood frozen, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Liam's hand found hers in the chaos. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook. Her head, eyes scanning the room. Near the stage, Nathan crouched beside the fallen glass, his face pale, his chest heaving, no blood, no wound. But the gun, security's now empty, lay on the floor between them. Someone had fired into the ceiling, a warning shot meant to scatter order into confusion. And it had worked. The guests backed away, the cameras rolling, feeding chaos into every corner of the world outside. Victor stood perfectly still amid the noise. His expression was calm, but his eyes were alive with calculation. "You've made quite the scene, Miss Collins," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the alarm. "The world will have its story now, won't it?" Emma met his gaze, the folded will still clutched in her trembling hands. "Not a story," she said, "a confession." Nathan rose, his composure gone. "You think you can destroy me with that?" he spat. You don't understand the power you're playing with." His voice cracked, desperate. Emma's reply was quiet, but lethal. "I understand it better than you ever did." She handed the papers to Liam, who stepped forward, holding them up for the cameras. The seal gleamed under the red lights. The crowd erupted again. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward, the storm no longer just in the room, but across every broadcast, every screen. Nathan lunged for the folder, but Victor caught his arm, smiling thinly. "Not here," he murmured. "Let the Empire die with dignity." The words chilled even Emma. For once, Victor's cruelty sounded almost like mercy. Security forced Nathan back, his voice breaking into incoherent protests. "She abandoned us," he screamed. "She left me with everything." The words cracked through the noise like splinters of truth. Emma's breath caught. "You took what wasn't yours," she whispered. "And still, you were never satisfied." Nathan's eyes filled, not with anger, but with the weight of something close to regret. Victor turned to Emma. "And you?" he asked. "What satisfaction do you expect? The headlines will call you righteous today and ruthless tomorrow. What will you be when the noise fades?" She looked past him, toward the staff watching from the corners, the ones who had seen her fall and rise again. "I'll be free," she said simply. "That's enough." The police arrived soon after, their uniforms slicing through the chaos. Cameras followed every step as Nathan Collins was led out, his head lowered, his legacy in pieces. Victor walked out on his own, calm, almost regal, though his empire was already burning. He paused only once, glancing back at Emma with something that might have been respect or warning or both. When the ballroom emptied, the silence was almost unbearable. Shattered glass glittered across the floor like frozen tears. Emma knelt to pick up one of the shards, her reflection bending in its curve. Two faces, one past, one present, finally meeting. She set it gently on the table and exhaled. The storm was over, but peace didn't feel like triumph. It felt like exhaustion. She stood beneath the fractured chandelier, the one that had watched her humiliation, her revenge, her truth. The light above her trembled but held. In that flickering glow, she realized victory had never been about taking back what was hers. It was about releasing what no longer was. And as the echoes faded, Emma Collins finally stopped running from her name. Morning came grey and heavy over the city. The Sterling Grand's ballroom, once alive with light, now stood dark and sealed off behind police tape. Reporters gathered outside like vultures circling what was left of a feast. Inside, the faint echo of the night before still clung to the air. Gunpowder, perfume, and shame. Emma watched from the mezzanine, unseen by the crowd below. The news spread faster than the dawn. Collins' heir returns, exposes family fraud. Victor Hale, under investigation for corporate manipulation. Headlines glimmered across every screen, her name entangled with theirs. Nathan's image, handcuffed, hollow-eyed, filled the morning broadcasts. Victor's face appeared only once, silent and expressionless, as he entered a black car and vanished from sight. Emma didn't celebrate. She couldn't. Victory tasted like dust. The hotel was quiet again, emptied of luxury and lies. Liam stood beside her, a silent presence in the aftermath. "It's over," he said softly. She nodded, though part of her knew it wasn't. Some storms don't end, they just change shape, and this one had only begun to shift. Later that afternoon she walked the empty corridors. The gold trimming of the walls seemed to dull under the pale light. The silence was deeper now, cleaner. She passed the ballroom doors and stopped, her reflection warped in the broken glass. The woman staring back was the same and yet unrecognizable, the ghost of a girl who'd once been humiliated here. Mr. Grant was next. They found him in his office, hands trembling, as investigators searched through his drawers. He didn't fight. He just smiled weakly when Emma appeared in the doorway. "You think this will change anything?" he asked. "They'll just replace us with new monsters." She met his eyes, calm and tired. "Then I'll keep fighting them one by one." By evening, the board of Collins Industries convened to announce Nathan's resignation and Emma's reinstatement as majority shareholder. Cameras flashed. Statements were read. She stood behind the podium, speaking only once. "The Collins name has been cleansed," she said, "not of its past, but of its silence." The applause was polite, almost reverent, but her voice trembled only slightly. When the conference ended, she slipped away through the back exit, leaving the noise behind. Outside, the air was cold and wet with rain. The city stretched before her, vast, indifferent, alive. Power had always been a game played above the world. She'd spent her life climbing toward it, only to find that freedom had never lived up there. It had lived below, among the unseen. Liam found her near the hotel fountain, water rippling under the soft drizzle. "You could rebuild it all," he said. "Your father's company, the Empire." Emma shook her head. "No. I'll rebuild something different." Her reflection shimmered beside his in the water, both fragile, both real. "What I want can't be bought," she said. "It can only be lived." The sound of distant sirens drifted through the streets. Somewhere, another empire was falling, another truth unraveling. She should have felt relief, but all she felt was a quiet ache. Her brother was gone, Victor was in hiding, and the legacy her father left had turned to ruin. The weight of it pressed on her chest like a crown she no longer wanted to wear. She turned to leave, pulling her coat tighter. But as she passed the front desk, a small envelope waited with her name on it. E. Collins. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, deliberate. She opened it, heart quickening. Inside was a single note, written in ink so dark it almost shimmered. "You may have won this battle, but the war isn't over." The rain stopped before sunrise, leaving the city washed clean. Light crept over the skyline in gentle strokes of gold, glimmering on the wet pavement below. Inside the Sterling Grand, workers moved quietly, polishing, restoring, rebuilding. Was breathing again. The hotel, slower, softer. Emma watched from the mezzanine, her hands resting on the railing, her reflection faint in the glass. A week had passed since the headlines faded. The investigators had gone. The press moved on to newer scandals. But inside these walls, something different had taken root, a quiet honesty, fragile but real. The staff spoke her name now without fear. She didn't walk above them anymore. She walked among them, listening, learning, existing without armor. The Collins crest still hung in the lobby, its gold surface dulled by time. Emma paused before it, tracing the edge of the metal with her fingertips. Her father's motto still etched beneath, "Virtus ante gloriam," virtue before glory. For the first time, those words didn't sound like expectation. They sounded like forgiveness. She whispered them aloud, letting them become her own. Upstairs, her new office overlooked the same skyline where Nathan once stood. The desk was smaller now, the windows bare, the space stripped of vanity. On the wall behind her there were no portraits, only a single photograph, the staff smiling, together. It wasn't the empire she inherited, it was the family she chose to build. Liam entered quietly, 2 coffees in hand. "You're early," he said. "Couldn't sleep?" She smiled faintly. "I slept enough for the years I didn't." They stood side by side, watching the morning unfold beyond the glass. "So," he said softly, "what happens now?" Emma looked at the city below, awake, endless, forgiving. "Now," she said, "we live without pretending." She spent the day among the staff, helping, laughing, listening. No cameras, no pretense, Just work and warmth and human noise. Rosa hugged her before leaving that evening, whispering, "Your father would be proud." Emma smiled. "Maybe, but I'm proud of who I became without him." The words felt final, not a rejection, but release. That night, she walked alone through the grand ballroom. The chandeliers glowed softly, their crystals repaired but not replaced. The scars in the marble floor remained, not flaws, but reminders. She ran her hand across them and felt gratitude where once there had been shame. The ghosts of her past had stopped following her. They were at rest. She stood beneath the same spot where she'd been fired, where the first chapter of her silence began. The air was still, almost reverent. "You don't win dignity," she whispered. "You choose it again and again, no matter who tries to take it." Her voice trembled, not from pain, but peace. Outside, the city shimmered with the light of ordinary lives. No titles, no cameras, no wars. Just people, surviving, falling, rebuilding. For the first time, Emma didn't need the world to see her to know she existed. The name Collins no longer defined her. The woman who carried it finally did. She lingered a moment longer beneath the chandeliers, then turned toward the exit. Her reflection followed beside her in the polished floor, no longer divided between past and present, but whole. As she stepped into the quiet dawn, the doors of the Sterling Grand closed behind her, not as the end of her story, but the beginning of the life she finally chose.